Okay, so yeah, 20 participants rolling in. And I think we're right on time, 7 o'clock. So we'll give everyone a few minutes to pile in the virtual door. And we're recording this too. So this will end up being over on the MWAC archive with all the other talks.
YouTube?
Yeah, these will all be on YouTube, yeah.
All right, cool.
And we'll send you out a link once we get that uploaded and prepared.
Yeah, there's been bits and pieces of interest from over this side of folk that like to see it, but obviously aren't going to hang out till 1 in the morning or midnight, as the case is.
Well, they're on their way out to eat.
Yeah, right after dinner. So I don't know. We look like we're pretty steady at 95. Maybe a couple more minutes, but Mike or Frank, wherever you feel like doing the intro, go for it.
Okay, yeah. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. This is part of a continuing education series that our friends group, in this case, the White Mountain Avalanche Education Foundation is helping us put on. Tonight, well, first I should introduce myself. I'm the director of the Mount Washington Avalanche Center, Frank Karras. We write the advisories and do the rescue up on Mount Washington. Joining us tonight is Mike Austin, who I met, 15 years ago or so, skiing on an avalanche class, and we've gone on to do some adventures together. And Mike is now a guide, an avalanche instructor, expat Scott, who decided that he would rather spend more time in snow and less time in fog and rain, so relocated to outside of Chamonix. Mike has a unique opportunity to teach American-style avalanche classes, meaning sort of an airy model of avalanche class to people in Europe and Brits who travel there. And he's going to give us his take on making better decisions. So take it away, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Yep. Making better decisions in avalanche terrain. It was a fun presentation to put together, and it kind of crystallized a lot of things that I've been working through and looking at, and some of the thought processes in avalanche education that's been around now for the last 2 or 3 years, and some of the advances in that, and some of the more some of the latest theories in relation to that. So it's actually just been really interesting for me to delve into this as a subject. It's going to be pitched at a kind of a slightly higher level. So this is maybe something that we'd be presenting on our avalanche classes to the sort of upper end level 2 students that are coming in with really strong skills, or something more likely that we teach on one of our professional classes, on one of our professional courses. So that said, if you don't have that super high-end avalanche education background, there will be a lot of stuff here in the next hour or so where hopefully you'll be able to pull out some nuggets and something useful that you can use and as you go around the mountains and to help make better decisions in avalanche terrain. Now, how are we going to do this? What's going on here? All right, how do I? Just bear with me. There we go. So yeah, everything happens for the reason sometimes is that we make bad decisions, and I think it sounds kind of obvious, but if a great way to arriving at better decisions is to negate the bad decisions. If we make fewer bad decisions, then de facto our decision making is going to get better, right? So a lot of what we're going to be talking about this evening is eliminating the bad, and thereby we hopefully end up with better decisions. Let's have a look at this here now. So when we're looking at decisions in avalanche terrain, what we think the problem is and what actually the problem is are quite different things potentially. And so for the first part of the lecture, I want to kind of look at some big picture issues here and have us maybe thinking slightly different about the context and the problems that we face when we're in avalanche terrain and the decisions that we make. And some of the solutions that we might be able to offer there will be kind of situational awareness, and we'll talk a little bit about that as the solutions, and then some margins that we can layer in to protect ourselves from bad decisions. And then we're going to finish off with a case study as well. We've got a couple of case studies as we work through the next little while. So I guess one of the first myths to dispel is that, you know, accidents don't happen to just poor, ill-equipped mountaineers and skiers. You know, I know on Mount Washington, we get a lot of people that maybe turn up with not the right equipment, with spikes on the feet, that, as opposed to proper crampons, with very limited knowledge and skills, and they're trying to get to the top. But the reality is that a large percentage of our avalanche victims and our accident victims in the mountains, both here and in North America, both here in Europe and North America, is that they have a high level of experience. And if you can see there at the bottom, the source for that information there, it breaks it down. Mountaineers most affected, you know, you're talking with a lot of experience, 60% experts, 22%. McCammon cites 70% of experienced people being victims in avalanche involvement. So certainly let's dispel the myth that it's poorly equipped, poorly knowledgeable people that are getting involved in accidents in the mountains and avalanches. That's not the case. It's affecting all of us across the spectrum. And across age groups as well. Yeah. So one of the reasons why it's hard to make decisions in avalanche terrain is that avoiding these human factors is actually really complicated. It's really hard. There's a whole bunch of things going on in the background that we'll talk about that inhibit us making good decisions. And one of the key things, and I'll keep coming back to here today, is that our culture outweighs any strategy that we have. And what do I mean by that? You know, the strategy is that we would have would be something, the information and the skills that you would get on your level 1 AVI course, the level 2 AVI course, or from me talking now, I can give you a whole bunch of strategies to make better decisions. But ultimately, the ski culture that we've grown up with and that we got into skiing and climbing and mountaineering to begin with outweighs that. And the way it outweighs that is that we didn't go skiing in the back country to have checklists and to have limitations on what we should do and how we communicate and how we interact with the snow. We're skiers, we're climbers. Our culture is of going out and having hedonistic fun, because that is why we're there. It's the love of our sport. And that's always going to be secondary to strategy. If you think about other high risk practitioners practitioners in other high-risk environments, let's say firefighters, well, you know, that's a job, and they're going into there, and from day one they're learning about strategy, and it's all about processes and the way they go about their business. And sure, there's a culture there, but the two go hand in hand. And strategy then, as a pilot, as a firefighter, as a soldier, the strategy has a really good, the strategy is part of the culture, whereas our culture is slightly different. We come into it, and then as things become more serious and we become more involved, then we start layering in strategy to make ourselves safer. And it's almost like it's a secondary phase. I hope that makes sense there. So yeah, what is the problem, and what really is the problem? What do we perceive to be the problem? What actually is the problem? And one of the key things is that the mountains, the backcountry, are more dangerous than we actually think. And I love this quote by Mark Smith in his essay, The Big Lie. His subtitle for this lecture for his essay is Truth and Culture in a High-Risk Environment. And it is, you know, if you read that there, we don't operate in a benign environment because we're in it all the time, and because our culture tells us going into the mountains is fun, and we have the best days of our lives, and there's powder in our faces. And we go into it regularly, and we drink a beer at the end of the day, and we're there with our friends, and we're recreating. We make this bubble around us to make us feel that this is a safe culture. And often as skiers, our introduction to that culture is through a resort where those hazards are moderated. But when we step beyond that boundary fence, have no doubt about it, we are in a high risk, high consequence environment. You know, we kind of sucker ourselves through watching ski movies and having that good time. That isn't the case when actually it is. And I can demonstrate that here. So this is a model by a Swiss avalanche specialist called Manuel Genschwein, and it's like really wordy, and it's like really difficult for you to say to go through it. It needs to be read 2 or 3 times before the penny kinds of drop. But it's really, really interesting. So you may have heard, but so I'll paraphrase it. You may have heard that. Your chance of dying in a ski tour going out into the backcountry is the same as driving to the ski resort, right? And he brings out this figure of 1 in 100,000. That's kind of been established as a correct figure by of all things, the health and safety executive in the UK. And you think, well, that's pretty good. You know, that's great. But then what Genschwein talks about is like, yeah, but it's, you know, your chance of dying is 1 in 100,000, but you repeatedly expose yourself to that risk day after day, ski tour after ski tour. And he then took that number, and he took a mountain guide, a Swiss mountain guide, an average Swiss mountain guide, and he looked at the career of that mountain guide over many years, and he brings this 1 in 100,000 risk of death by avalanche. And he brings it right down to 1 in 50. And that's if that guy was operating in really conservative in his actions, and operating in the hazard risk chart on the right here within the green zone. And he says if he was a really kind of bullish guide and often pushed into the yellow, that figure came down to 1 to 25. And it's this concept of repeated exposure that I think is overlooked, and it's actually really quite fundamental to demonstrate that the environment, that backcountry environment, is way more hazardous than we give credit to. I've got a nice little case study here that talks about repeated exposure on the Goûter couloir, which is the normal access route to climb Mont Blanc. And at the top of this, this couloir here is a mountain hut, which is the Goûter Refuge. And there's loads of stuff comes down this couloir, loads of rock fall, loads of stone fall. And it's a really serious objective hazard. So the facts in relation to it of repeated exposure on it. So we can just pull some figures off here, a little bit like Genshrein does when he talks about his 1 in 100,000 skiers. And I don't want to get too much into kind of statistics, statistics and analyze. And this is a very broad paintbrush that I'm giving here in relation to this route, but I think it demonstrates in quite an obtuse way my point of repeated exposure. So 102 deaths between 1990 and 2017, 230 injuries. And so that equates to roughly about 3.7, 3.8 deaths per year. It's like, okay, well, that's a lot of people dying there, but that is over a 27-year period. And every year, about 17,500, sometimes more people per summer go up that route. That's the way you climb Mont Blanc. That's the way you get to the summit. So you've got to negotiate this couloir that you can see in the photograph. Here, people kind of going up the pathway up and down. It's not a technically challenging route. However, it's exposed to stonefall danger. And so if we look at that figure of 3.7 deaths per year, and we see 17,500 people going up there, it means that there's a death for every 4,700 persons on the mountain. And so it's like, well, okay, well, that's not great, but it's Mont Blanc is this big objective over here in Europe. It's the highest mountain in Western Europe, and it's a lifetime ambition for a lot of people to climb this peak. It'd be like the Western European equivalent of Denali. It's a real aspirational peak to go and climb. It's definitely on a lot of people's tick list to go up there, right? So 1 in 4,700 people, that seems kind of reasonable. That's a reasonable risk to take. If we look at risk versus reward, then okay, well, maybe that's a risk I'm willing to take. So let's now talk about a guide that operates over here and guides Mont Blanc regularly. So this is Simon's story here. He's an IFMGA certified mountain guide. He's 50 years of age, and he's been guiding full time in the mountains for 20 plus years. And he considers himself a low risk profile. If we think about that risk hazard chart there that we looked at on the Genshrein slide, he believes he's absolutely operating in the green. And the reason for that is he works in Antarctica for the first part of his, for a big chunk of his season, as their snow safety officer for the big logistics company down there, ALE, based out of Salt Lake. And he's a snow safety officer. It's mainly an office job. He goes out from time to time for sure. And, but it's an environment he's very comfortable in. And then when he gets back from that over the summertime, because his family lives at the bottom of Mont Blanc, he does a lot of guiding on Mont Blanc. He does some ski guiding too, but generally between ALE and Antarctica and doing multiple ascents of Mont Blanc, that's his income for the year. And he does about 10 ascents per season, sometimes more. One year he did like 17 ascents of Mont Blanc, other years less, but let's just say around roughly he does 10 ascents of this mountain a year with clients. And he believes that's low risk guiding. He's got quite a lot of safety margins in there. He spends a week with the clients before they do the route. They acclimatize on other high mountains. Mont Blanc itself isn't a particularly technical peak. It's mainly a snow climb, steep snow, but there's not much in the technical realm there that's challenging. He understands his clients, how they're going to behave at altitude, because he's been working with them. It's got great communications with sat phones, regular cell service. As we saw, there's a mountain refuge high on the mountain that's manned, that has lots of other guides up there. Heli access is potentially possible right to the summit. So he feels like there's a lot of margins there, and he doesn't think it's a high-risk profile. But now, if we factor in the reality of repeated exposure for Simon, with his clients, he crosses that couloir 20 times a year, because it's 10 up, but also 10 times down. And over a 25-year career of guiding that route, his chance of dying drops to 1 in 19. Now, as I said, this is a broad brush I'm painting with this. He would argue that he mitigates that by not guiding at certain times of the year when the rockfall is more extreme, and some other things. But ultimately, look at the difference in his risk from the repeated exposure in a hazardous environment that he is subjecting himself to. It goes from 4,730 to 19, because year after year he exposed himself. And if you think about it, as we go out as skiers into the backcountry day after day, year after year, we are aggregating repeated exposure in a hazardous environment. Yeah, and the chances of him requiring a heli-evac is down to 1 in 8. That injury figure relates to reportable significant injuries. Quite sobering figures. And as Genshwein puts it, he relates those figures coming down to within the realms of playing Russian roulette because of repeated exposure. So there we go. We do not operate in a benign environment, and I think we need to be really aware of that. It can be, going up on a nice spring day into Tuckerman's, and we have a ranger station there, and it can feel quite benign, but the mountains are not a benign place. Now we add to this that we're also subject to flawed thinking, to kind of skewed human behaviors, biases, and such. So yeah, let's have a look at that. Let's talk a bit about that, because now this also affects our decision making, because we've maybe all heard of McCammon's FACETS, and if you haven't, you should go and take a level 1 AVI class. But in that AVI class, we looked at you'll look at some of the human behaviors in avalanche terrain that are common in, were deemed by McCammon to be common in accidents back in the year 2000. And when we taught avalanche classes several years ago, we would teach these facets that McCammon talked about: familiarity. If we're in familiar terrain, then we were more likely to be caught in an accident. Accepting of the hazard, committing to a route, seeing tracks and social proof, all of these things. But now if we kind of move slightly beyond that, if we start to think about strategies to counteract those, and we look at strategies for other human behaviors, we still come back to our culture outweighing our strategy. So let's look at some ways to get beyond McCammon's FACETS, and look at some of the poor human behaviors that we make. So we'll be talking about situational awareness. That's key, right? If we're not aware of what's around us, then we're likely to make poor decisions. And we'll look at the way we approach our decision making. And then we'll look at some of the margins that we can layer in to protect ourselves from this hazardous environment that I've been talking about. So situational awareness. And so, you know, we could sit down and talk about situational awareness for the next hour by itself, but there's three phases to it. And I mean, the most obvious part of situational awareness is observation of a hazard, right? And then we integrate what we see, and then we decide what we're going to do. That's the observation, integration, and projection, the three parts of situational awareness. But most of our errors in avalanche accidents happen in this first phase here, in the observation phase. About 70% of accidents, when we look in avalanche incidents, failures in situational awareness occur in that observational phase. We don't see it. So why don't we see it? Well, I guess to answer that question, why are we failing in our situational awareness? Why are we failing to see hazards, these warning signs around us that would give us clues that we're in a heightened hazardous environment? Say warmth things, say signs of other avalanches. I think it's useful to have a look at some of the thoughts of this guy here. So you may have heard about him. You may have read his book, The Chimp Paradox. Very interesting. He's an interesting guy. And putting this section of the presentation together, it's like, wow, so many images of monkeys on skis on Google. That's yeah, so great. Let's use those. But, so what's interesting about Steve Peters is that yeah, his work follows a lot of human behavioral science, but in his case, specifically about athletes and within the sports industry. So at the most basic concept, we're not, what his argument, what he points out is, you know, our brain really isn't developed for a modern world. We live in an age of cognitive overload, because if you think about it, when did we have to do really complex multitasking decision-making in a high-risk environment? And, you know, up until really to the Industrial Revolution 150 years ago, that really wasn't an issue very often to us. You know, you chase down the antelope, you kill the antelope, and okay, there may have been some complexity going on and around that, but it's not like, you know, the flight deck of an aircraft going into a storm. There's not all of these complex tasks that need to be dealt with simultaneously. So yeah, our brain really hasn't developed to catch up with that. And guess what? Situational awareness is the first casualty of that cognitive overload. So Peters follows Kahneman's thinking fast and slow, and he breaks down in a layman's way. He breaks down the brain into two parts. And he says, okay, you've got your monkey brain, And you've got your, let's call it your gentleman's brain, all right? And if we look at our monkey brain, our inner chimp, we can see here that we've got the monkey brain is our fight and flight emotion, right? It's all about survival. He's our pre-industrial revolution brain personified. He's about sex. When's my next dinner coming from? Let's sleep. He's the fun guy. He's the fun guy back there. So, you know, Mike, you want to go ski powder. Mike, you want to go ski powder right now. That's my inner chimp talking to me. It's very emotional. He can be aggressive. He holds a grudge. So that's one part of our brain, right? And then we have our gentleman brain. So that's our prefrontal cortex. That's where we do our rational and analytical thinking. And it's this part of our brain that that's where all this complex multitasking takes place. So if that gets overwhelmed, as we've said, our situational awareness disappears, right? So the two are kind of in conflict with each other. But really, if we think about us being in the back country, trying to make decisions, trying to make clear and calculated decisions, we want to be thinking with our gentleman brain, right? We don't want the chimp in charge, because that's probably going to lead to some poor outcomes after a period of time. So how do we cage our inner chimp? So we have to understand that he likes to, when some information comes into us, it comes in via the chimp. He'll be the one making the decision initially. So we need to recognize that. But he can be kind of dealt with in a number of ways. And generally a pause and a gap between what he wants and what he thinks and us doing, between our observational phase of situational awareness and our projection phase, then that is a good way of keeping that impulsive, egotistical, hedonistic side of ourselves in check. And really, when we're dropping into the back country, we really want to be following our gentleman brain. That's not to say there isn't a place for the chimp being with us. We can't get rid of the chimp anyway. He is essentially a large part of us. You know, so, you know, I've put there a goal is to drop into our line without the chimp, but a more realistic way would be to say is our goal is to drop into our line with our chimp in the back seat, having thought in our gentleman way, rationalize our process of how we're going to look at the objective dangers and engage our situational awareness before we drop into our line. So maybe at this time it's a good time for me to discuss some of my methods for situational awareness. And so I'll say, well, what's my AVI problem here right now? So is my problem wind slab? Is my problem a new snow event? Is it a persistent weak layer? Is it here? Is it at this elevation? Is it this aspect? And how big a problem is it going to be for me? So that's kind of in the back of my mind all the time when in relation to avalanche problems. How can I improve my margin in this terrain? And I'll talk about it. I'll discuss that. What do you think? What if we go over here? Well, then maybe that problem's less over here and we can get just as good as skiing. And this is a big one for me. You know, what are the consequences if before I drop into a ski line, if I've got my decision making wrong, what will happen to me? Will I be fanned out over a small, wide open slope, or will I take a really long ride over cliffs and into trees? What are the consequences if my situational awareness has been flawed and I do get avalanched? And a big one is going back to that, to dealing with our chimp, is slowing down. Because if we're hungry, if we're thirsty, if we're in oxygen deficit, if we're hot and sweaty and uncomfortable, the chimp's in charge, right? That gentleman part of our brain reverts back to the chimp. Whereas if we put that pause in, if we're not, trying to bust out a really high skinning rate, if we're drinking, if we're pausing to chat and to see what's around us, then we will make better decisions. So for me, slowing down is a key way of maintaining my situational awareness. So, okay, that's just me, and you may want to take some of those, you may not, and that's fine. But maybe useful at this stage to see how I maintain my situational awareness when I'm operating well. And I wish I could. It was like this checklist all the time, right? But in the perfect world, on the perfect day, I'm going through some of these questions pretty repeatedly throughout my day, asking these same questions time and again. So that's my situational awareness checklist, but maybe it's useful to look at some other ways of maintaining situational awareness. There's some tools out there that can help us maintain a strong situational awareness. A lot of this comes from Atkins and his strategic mindset, which was introduced for ski guides in heli operations in Canada. And it's been really positive in how they address their mindset going out each day. It doesn't translate great to individuals going out. So, even though I think Atkins is excellent, it's difficult to implement for individual guides working autonomously. It's difficult for recreationalists to get into that. And it works specifically well for organizations that are in the same terrain day after day after day. It was developed for heli operations where that process is going on. So let's have a look at some others. And again, I'm not advocating particularly any of these, but really I'm just presenting other people's ideas here to you today. And giving you the opportunity to just like, I like that. I never seen that before. I'll take that from this, and I kind of like that from there. And hopefully you'll come with your own toolkit at the end of this process of how you maintain situational awareness, and through that make better decisions. I'll start with a little plug from our own, from my own kind of company, and this is an aid memoir. It's a priming tool. So we give this card out as a laminate plastic card to our students on our level 1, and it's just highlighting some of the key things, some of the key warning signs that they need to be aware of, to be situationally aware of when they're out on the mountains. And when those start stacking up, then, that should be raising some red flags in their mind. And we have recent avalanche, rapid warming, wind transported slope, warmthing, shooting cracks, the observance of a weak layer in the snowpack when they're doing the pole tests, And again, if this is kind of, if you're like, oh, this is, wow, I've never heard a lot of this stuff, you need to go and take a level 1 AVI class. But for more seasoned backcountry users, this will be really common to you, and you'll integrate that anyway. But as a priming tool, it's still quite handy. And up the top there, what are the signs? What is my avalanche problem today? Where will it be? Key questions, key parts of our situational awareness. Really, the advantage of it, it's super simple. The disadvantage of it, it's super simple. It's a blunt, simple priming tool, nothing more and nothing less. This is an interesting decision-making tool here, a situational awareness tool. And this is taught to trainee French mountain guides in snow terrain by a guy called Alain Duclos, who's he's kind of like the French Bruce Tremper, if you know who Bruce Tremper is. Duclos works for the Savoie regional government here out in France, and he does a lot of accident investigation, and he advises on avalanche conditions in relation to the highways. So look up here in the top left-hand corner what Duclos has. Very similar to what we were just talking about on our priming tool, right? Rising temperatures, a weak layer, signs of recent avalanches, slopes above 30 degrees, recent loading of slopes, the avalanche forecast has. So he takes all of the same things that we've put on our priming tool here. And now he's gone a step further from that priming tool and says, right, take all of those warning signs and now project them into your terrain. And as you project them into your terrain, start acting accordingly. He refers to it as his modes of vigilance. Okay, so if you don't have many of those, and this is your proposed track into the mountains, and your terrain is pretty mellow, because you know if you don't have much of this going on here, you can be what he describes as a relaxed mode. And then you have multiple choices to make in that relaxed mode, right? The world is your oyster. It's open season, as Atkins might say. And then as we move further on along the scale, on this linear scale, if we have some of these parameters to be monitored, signs of avalanche or signs of rising temperature, and they are close to our proposed track, he's suggesting then we're in a suspicious mindset where our mode of vigilance should be raised. And this continues on, and further again, absolutely he advocates avoidance and then reduction. And then at the very far extreme, he says, well, it gets so far that if you've got all of these things going off, if you're seeing avalanches, you're on steep slopes, there's weak layers, your avalanche hazard on your forecast is elevated, and you're in complicated terrain. Really, at this stage, you're just gambling and you shouldn't be there. So this is, again, take it or leave it. Personally, all of these models, that they have their advantages and they have their flaws. Moving around the mountains and asking yourself, what mode of vigilance am I in and what should I be in? Maybe that's a good way to address your situational awareness. Moving right along, and don't worry, this is, there's not too many of these. I'm not just going to be banging out all of these situational awareness tools, but here's an interesting one called, based on this book, this pamphlet that was introduced by the United States Royal Marines, called Left a Bang by Van Horn. And obviously it's from a military context, but it takes clues for the environment and encourages the individual to act appropriately. Wow. That sounds like that could have some applications in avalanche terrain, right? And so it's very similar to Duclos. And let's have a look at it here. The adaptation of it was in the Avalanche Review a little while ago now, and they changed it from left of bang to left of woomph. But what I like about it specifically is that it emphasizes the dangers of anomalies. And the thing about anomalies is anomalies kill experts, all right? Because we have familiarity with hazardous terrain, our situational awareness is generally good as mountain guides, as avalanche professionals. Just through repeated exposure and experience, we become quite good at situational awareness. However, we're not good at dealing with anomalies. And I think it's very useful to understand that anomalies kill experts. And this was one of the key findings in Left of Bang. Let's have a look at Left of Bang here as it's been adapted in the Avalanche Review article I'm referring to, where it was called Left of Woomph. And then look how similar to Duclos that is. It's also very similar to something called the Oudna loop, again, a militaristic and a police tool for dealing with an escalation in that situation of hostile crowds and violent situations. But it's an escalation of color coding. And this, so we can see, like Duclos here, we can see our preparedness state, our mode of vigilance like Duclos, right? But interestingly, if we say the avalanche line is right here, you know, we're still using our gentleman's brain, our gentleman's mind, as opposed to our monkey's mind, right? As opposed to our inner chimp. And what we're saying is, if we're asking ourselves, well, where are we here? You know, why is my heart and respiration rate increased? Why am I ready to take action? Should I actually be here around this line, or should I be over here? And as Duclos would say, now we should be looking at avoidance. Now we should be looking at mitigation through islands of safety, skiing one at a time, heading towards less consequential, lower angle terrain. So just something different. But what I like about it specifically is its emphasis on anomalies. And I think if we take that key point away from Left of Bang alone, I think that's really useful. And I think we have a case study just to finish off with in a little while that emphasizes this anomaly, the dangers of anomalies. So the last one's a bit different. This is the last kind of situational awareness tool that we're going to talk about. And it's not really a situational tool. And that's what I like about it. Because you don't have this linear, you know, descriptive checklist to follow off. Let's have a look at this here now. What I like about it is it's a very simple tool that makes us calibrate and challenge our beliefs. How useful is that? If we can just say one word, one phrase, and instantly we calibrate our beliefs right there, right now. And to a certain extent, I think we can do that with this tool. It directly addresses uncertainty. And if you think about it, decision-making is nothing more than dealing with uncertainty, right? So this relates to a book by a woman called Annie Duke, and she's talking about thinking in bets in relation to dealing with uncertainty. And what she's, and what we can say is, she says life is like poker, not chess. We can say the backcountry is not like chess, it's like poker. So on our courses, we seem to get a lot of engineers come on our Avalanche courses over the years, very analytical thinkers. And analytical thinkers like engineers or say pilots, they believe is that what they're wanting from me as an Avalanche educator is key information, because they think that if they take information and they add that information to the application and skill, they will have an answer. This will be the Avalanche issue. It is, they will have a go or no go decision. But unfortunately, the backcountry isn't like that. In so much as when we look at a chess table, we have all the information at hand. You can see exactly what I've got, and I can see exactly what you've got. And there's nothing hidden. And for an analytical thinker, chess is the perfect game, because I have all the information and all my skill, and I will win. And if my skill is not as good as his skill, he will win. Poker isn't like that. Poker's still a game of skill. It's not a game of chance. There's an element of chance in it, but it's still a game of skill. The difference is there's uncertainty in poker because I don't have all of the information. Why is this important, Mike? So this is just what I'm saying there. Important information is hidden from us in the backcountry, just like poker. And poker players are constantly making decisions while dealing with uncertainty. Sound familiar? It's just like us in the backcountry, right? So Duke observes that for every decision in our life is a bet. We can extrapolate this decision-making in poker to everything. We're going to extrapolate it into the backcountry. But she says, look, everything we do in life in many ways is a bet. Will my life be better because I take that job offer, or should I just stick with my current job and wait to get promoted? It's a bet. It's a bet on the outcome. Will my life be better? Do we go the long way around, or do we take the shortcut? Well, actually, that's a bet. Maybe I'll get there quicker. Maybe I'll get there less stressed. Do I buy the cheap or the premium trash liners? That's a loaded question. You should always buy the premium trash lines. But it's a bet, because the cheap ones will save me money, but they might split as I take them out to the curb. Everything, she argues, in life is a bet to one degree, whilst dealing with uncertainty. So let's apply that to bet thinking and avalanche terrain. Absolutely, I'm not the first person to do this. But what we're going to do is we're going to embrace that in uncertainty. Think about our culture overcoming strategy. How many times do we say in the backcountry, I don't know, or I'm not certain, I'm not sure, right? We don't say that very often. Does this look good? Yeah, it looks good. No, it doesn't. I think by embracing, and what Duke argues is by embracing uncertainty, it gives us a lot of freedom to make our decisions. Right? It's okay to say that. We need to stop thinking about a line or a route being safe or unsafe, but with it being on a spectrum. We'll have safe over here and we'll have unsafe, dangerous over there. And, you know, we may be able to reduce the uncertainty to a very small margin, but generally when we're in avalanche terrain, 100% certainty is a very rare thing. And I think, you know, and again, going back to what we talked about, operating in a hazardous environment right at the beginning, by embracing uncertainty and accepting uncertainty, that's kind of what gives us a more realistic take on what we're dealing with. Excuse me. And finally, in relation to bet thinking and avalanche terrain, it'll keep us humble. And that's a good mindset. That's the gentleman mindset that we're aiming for, as opposed to our inner chimp. So yeah, Jenna Malone at Utah saw back in 2019 started applying bet thinking into avalanche terrain and avalanche problems. And it's super interesting. Just checking on our time here just yet, that's fine. And you don't need to know about poker to understand these concepts. I've never played a game of poker in my life, but you know, here's our poker hand ratings, and we know, I know, like 4 aces is better than 2 6s, right? That's 4 aces, good hand. Can it be beat? Yes, it can, because it could be beat by a straight flush and a roll flush, whatever. So what Jenna Malone did at USAW was she kind of allocated a poker hand to each avalanche problem. You know, she said something like loose snow from a recent storm. That might be quite a strong hand because the consequences of it are quite low. Whereas something like a deep, persistent slab would be a very poor hand. It would be a very dangerous hand to bet on. It might be 2 6s. And are you going to go all in on 2 6s? So, yeah, that's quite an interesting way of looking at the avalanche problem that we're dealing with on a daily basis, in this idea of allocating it a hand, betting on it, because everything in life's a bet, right? Why not bet on the avalanche problem? And interestingly, you know, they said something like persistent deep slab is a rigged game. It's, you know, it's really difficult to bet on. So then you choose not to play. You don't ski on a persistent weak slab. But now let's project this mindset to say something more of a Mount Washington problem, where we get an awful lot of wind slab all the time here. Because that allocation of bets to an avalanche problem relates really well to somewhere like Utah or Colorado. But if we're getting the same avalanche problem and we're allocating the same bet all the time, it kind of becomes a little bit pointless, right? But so maybe what we could do is allocate a bet to us as we look up a skid track, or we're about to drop into a line. What if I look at my avalanche problem like I have here, and it's like, yeah, it's a locked up snowpack. I've got a little bit of fresh on there. What do I think that hand is? Man, it's a really strong hand. The chance of me getting avalanched here is virtually nil. You know, there's maybe still a little bit of uncertainty. Who knows? Maybe there's a little tiny pocket of something that I'm unaware of. But I'm going to bet high here. I'm going to say I've got a straight flush. Is that a way of thinking? Now, if I'm stood on the top of the same slope, and it's like, I reckon I've got a couple of 6s here. Do I want to bet on that? By engaging that phrase, do I want to bet, triggers in us the requirement to vet and calibrate our beliefs. It's a really strong phrase, because when someone says, do you want to bet? We ask all of these questions. Well, am I missing something? How up to date is my information? How good is my information? Because I want to win that bet, right? You got to win the bet. If you're dealing in avalanche terrain. So very interestingly, by allocating a bet, it really raises our situational awareness. I kind of like this bet allocation tool in that context, by just asking this phrase, because I don't have to go through a linear pattern. I just say, would I bet on this? How, and if so, what hand am I holding? Is this a strong enough hand? So we take all of that situational awareness and we start layering in margins. And the more margins that we layer in, the easier it is to make decisions. What do I mean by margins? A strong team versus a group, having a good plan and a backup plan. Checklists such as good habits at the trailhead, doing a proper beacon check, quality communications. We can go on and on about different margins. But if we start layering in different margins, that they will slowly start to stack up and we'll have a nice fat margin. Rules, the Ulysses contract. We're not going to ski North Aspect today because I saw on the forecast it's had loads of wind loading for the last 3 days. So it doesn't matter how good it looks in there, we're not skiing North. We're not skiing North Aspect. If we have these margins, we get a margin of safety in ourselves. And that's a great way to tackle our really strong culture that makes us potentially make poor decisions. Let's talk about margins specifically that defeat culture. Because some of those margins, our chimp will get in the way. And he'll like, yeah, I know we weren't going to ski north, but it's not set up as a slab. It's just blown in as powder. And we should definitely ski north because it's looking really good. Margins that defeat culture are easy. And they're hard to break. They're hard to break down by the chimp. The margin of an early start, if we get out of our bed an hour earlier, then maybe we're not charging up the skin track really fast and hard, getting out of breath, and we know what that does, right? And we're not worried about scarcity of snow. It's a simple margin. Packing our sack the night before so we don't forget something important. It's a simple margin of being really good before we decide to ski a line that requires you to be really good is a strong margin. Margin of fitness, so we're not out of breath, margin of being fed and hydrated. Think about all of the things that engage our inner chimp thinking as opposed to our gentleman thinking. We can negate a lot of that through margins. The margins of high quality navigational tools that we know how to use. So instead of really struggling with our navigation as we're going along our way, we're making it simpler. The margin of SATCOM. So if anything does go wrong, we definitely can get somebody up to help us. Yeah. The margin of having done a wilderness first aid course, if anything goes wrong, that's a margin. And once you have those, a lot of these margins that defeat culture, they can't be taken away on the day, right? They can't be eroded by our inner chimp. They're there and they're easy and they're slotted in and they're not going anywhere. These are very powerful margins. And the key one, of course, the margin of terrain. Okay. If all else fails, by going to easier angle terrain, less consequential terrain, gives us a massive margin, right? If we funnel ourselves into terrain where there's only one way in, only one way out, and it has consequences, then we've just completely removed our strongest margin of all. If you don't think margins are really powerful, if you're into road cycling, look what Team Sky did in the Tour de France and on the pro cycling circuit in Europe. They added in all of these silly little, what was apparently silly little margins to give themselves what they refer to as marginal gains. They started traveling with a nutritionist that would give a specialized diet to each of the athletes. They had a custom vehicle that had onboard masseuses, color-coded water bottles. So each athlete at liquid stops would have their mix that was premium for them, advised by the nutrition. They even sent a team round ahead on multi-day tours, changing the mattresses and pillows so their athletes would have a good night's sleep. And the other cycling teams thought, these guys are nuts, until they started winning, because they layered in margin upon small, silly little marginal gains, and together they added up. And if we add in margins here, we're going to stack away. We're going to margin, and we're going to be hopefully a lot further away from the avalanche hazard. So I've been going on for about an hour now, and I'm just going to quickly finish with a last case study, and I'll go through it quite quickly. I've taken a bit longer than I wanted to get to this point, so we'll go through it. It's a case study that involved myself and some friends last year in the RV chain, which is not about an hour's drive from Chamonix, an hour and a half, and we've just gone down there for a day's ski touring. Avalanche forecast on the day was moderate. It was on New Year's Eve, so nearly a year ago. And we're going to follow this route up here, up this big west-facing bowl up to the summit, and then we're going to ski down the big west-facing bowl and in and out. Probably going to take us about 3 hours from the road, from the trailhead to get up, and an hour back down. Weather, we were at a really high, extended high pressure period, clear skies, no wind, hadn't snowed in a week. And so that's why we have this moderate forecast there. Interestingly, a temperature inversion, very cold in the valley. So like in the high teens Fahrenheit, low 20s. So very, very cold, as maybe you'd expect at the end of December. So, okay. So by the fact I'm using a case study, it suggests something's going to happen. And here's our peak here. And this is this big west-facing bowl that we're going to skin up, and then we're going to ski back down. Yeah, let me talk about who was there. So there was myself, and there was my good buddy, and let's call him Danny Boy. And I was there with my girlfriend, Sarah. And then we've got, well, the night before we were going, Danny Boy gives me a call, and it's like, this French friend of mine wants to come along. I've never skied with him before. And I'm like, really? Okay. Well, I was a bit pissy about that. I was like, I don't really like skiing with strangers. And so this guy turns up, and let's call him Rando Roger, because he's got all the Lycra, and man, this guy's fast. And he's whipping around the mountain as we're skinning in. And like, I'm trying to keep up with Rando Roger as we're going in here up to this coombe. And what's interesting is just right around here is a big fish mouth, right? There's a glide crack. That's interesting. That's kind of above our route that we want to go up. But, you know, it's freezing cold and, And this isn't a particularly steep coombe, but so given those dynamics, now start to think about what kind of mindset we were in going in here. And this is a fat map layer of the same mountain. This is the bowl here. So not, even though in the previous slide, it looks really quite a steep line, not particularly steep enough, certainly steepens up about 35 at the top, but not crazy steep. So now, you know, I'm a bit grumpy with my monkey mindset. I'm like, well, you know, got Rando Roger coming along. I've never met him before, and he's really fast, and he's wearing Lycra, and I don't like guys in Lycra. And well, you know, he's like, he doesn't get out much, and he's like super psyched, and he's super keen to get up there. And I'm just wanting a mellow day. And you know, there's a whole bunch of human factors going on, but for this case study, let's just look at this case study in relation to decision making. We've talked about it since, and we identified a whole bunch of human behaviors that were completely wrong. We had a poor group, lost that margin, right? It wasn't in so much it wasn't an even match group. There was a stranger in our group. Expectations were different within the group. So there was a whole bunch of human factors going on there. But let's forget about that. Let's just talk about our decision making to go in there on that day. Let's talk about some of these decision-making situational awareness tools that we've talked about in the context of this mountain. So let's not use the hindsight that something's going to happen. Let's visualize ourselves, visualize yourself as part of this group. What do you think the hand we're holding is? So let's go back. Hasn't snowed for over a week, cold temperatures, moderate avalanche forecast, but we've got a glide crack up here and we can't go any other way. If we're gonna go up here, we're gonna have to kind of deal with this glide crack. But that snow's locked up. I mean, we're having to put ski crampons on to get up there. It's so hard. It's pretty icy. And glide avalanches are a really weird problem. That glide crack can remain there for another month and not move, or maybe not. So what hand are you going to allocate yourself in any, do you want to bet? Do you want to bet on going up this route? Where are you going to allocate yourself? Doesn't matter what it is, but just give yourself an allocation now. What do you think going up this route is in your mind? Think about the modes of vigilance. Where is your mode of vigilance as you're approaching here on the flats and as you're starting to zigzag up here now? And from here to the summit, it's going to take you about an hour. Your exposure to this fish mouth, you'll be exposed to it half the time you won't as you move through the low angle terrain in here. So if it's going to take an hour and a half to get from, about an hour from here to here, your exposure is going to be at least half an hour, probably 45 minutes exposure beneath this fish mouth. What's your bet? And what's your mode of vigilance? Look at left of Wumpf. Where are we going in here? Now, as we start to move our way up, Rando Rogers, he's flying, he's up and down, he's up there, he's waiting for us. Not poor communication, but this is a decision-making case study. And as I'm going up, and we're about 3/4 of the way up that combe, that bowl, just like I hear a pop. Just really subtle, super subtle. Was that a pop? I didn't feel a collapse. It was just like a pop. It wasn't a whoomph, definitely wasn't a whoomph. It was like, no. I'm looking around, has something fallen off a corner? So, Hear a pop. What's my mode of vigilance? Where am I? Like my monkey's going nuts. I'm breathing hard. We're moving too fast up here. I'm not thinking analytically. I'm not thinking with my rational gentleman's brain. I'm thirsty. I'm hot. I'm tired. I'm grumpy because Roger's shooting up and away in a head there. Yeah. And then this happens. So what happened is we got to just here. And then I heard a much louder pop. And yeah. I was like, whoa, what was that? And Danny Boy hears that pop as well. And we look at each other, it's like, we're not happy. Let's get off this. So we transitioned and we skied off to the side here. And just as we moved away, within about 20 seconds, the whole slope ripped out and set down this line of avalanche going down here. Now, we weren't the only people on that route that day. There was another group here and another group here. Probably about 4 groups in total, with about 15 or 20 people on this slope when this popped out. And we were off here to the side. So now that glide avalanche is released, it's gone full depth, released a large amount of snow that's gone crushing down. Your decision, your bet allocation, is it still the same? Or have you changed it? It kind of really doesn't matter, does it? Because the decision was made before. It's a classic low probability, high consequence event. That's really hard to bet on, isn't it? It's like you could put a really high bet on that. You maybe said 4 aces. You maybe said maybe less. Maybe you said 3 of a kind. And it could be a high likelihood successful bet, but don't forget we're dealing with uncertainty. And what's interesting from our point of view was, if you think about repeated exposure, you could say these people on this slope, and luckily there was a couple of very minor injuries, but nobody was buried, nobody was seriously hurt. The avalanche basically threaded the needle between these groups. Just cuts and bruises by a party down here. And you could say that everybody there that day for that glide release to go was really unlucky for that to go just when they're on there. It could have stayed there for weeks, and for it just to pop out like that while we're just underneath it for that half hour, 45 minutes, you could say, wow, you guys were really unlucky. You could say it's a really bad decision. And I would say it was a really bad decision. Because certainly for Danny Boy and myself is the repeated exposure. If we're spending the 20 years skiing and climbing in the mountains, then the likelihood of doing that in such a hazardous environment is that something will happen one day. And then to take the deliberate decision to place yourself underneath an overhead hazard is clearly a bad decision. So, situational awareness tools, take from them what you will. If you like some of them, use what's in there. I really like that Annie Duke's thinking in bets. So kind of I've updated my method for maintaining situational awareness. And so everything that I had before, absolutely. And then I've added in anomalies. And I always like, and now I'm kind of like, whereas used before, I used to say, what are the consequences if this slope goes? I'm also thinking, well, what hand am I holding? And do I want to bet? And then finally, it's just a recap, really. These situational awareness tools and our moderating mindsets, they'll help our decision making, but we need to be fully aware that we operate with uncertainty and with repeated exposure in a hazardous environment. And, the simple solution to that is our margins, and in particular, the margin of choosing appropriate terrain. And if our culture outweighs our strategy, that we know it does, really long term, we need to think about our culture and reining it back because of the repeated exposure in a hazardous situation. Yeah. All right, that's it. That's it. I think we ran a bit long there. I do apologize.
Thanks, Mike. That was really good. I think a lot of takeaways for that, for sure, especially just different mindsets on how to approach this. And we didn't get a ton of questions, but there's a few out there, and I'll start with this one real quick. Can you comment on how much the decision-making margin changes if you don't have access to frequent weather forecasts or AVI forecasts?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. Yeah, it was quite interesting. I was talking about Alan Declos there with his motor vigilance, and I was speaking with him last week, and he's got this amazing disparaging view of the avalanche forecast. He refers to it as a black box. It's like, well, something good might come out of that black box, or it could just be garbage. He's like that. So, he actually doesn't put a great deal of trust in avalanche forecast anyway. So, but, to answer that question, I think, yeah, you just have to, that biggest margin of all, that terrain is your key one. And you can, I refer to Atkins there, but, they talk about this stepping out mindset where you slowly prod into more aggressive terrain over a period of time as you, and think about our priming tool there. And if you're not seeing any of those signs, then you can start pushing things up, dig your own pits, absolutely, run your own stability tests. But it's a slow process, to move into a mindset of skiing aggressive, consequential terrain within a day or two of going to a new area where you don't have an avalanche or a weather forecast isn't a good idea. That said, I talked about margins there. One of the margins I talked about was GPS and satellite communications, like something like an InReach. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, they'll give you an hourly weather forecast. So there's a margin right there that you can just throw a little bit of money at. It's a margin of rescue, but it's also a margin of information.
Any other live questions out there? There's one other kind of off-topic question, but your thoughts on the recent beep malfunction or PEEPS malfunction? That's a pretty big topic to dive into, but it seems like it falls under that, just another layer of margin, right? You're kind of gambling. And
yeah, absolutely. And it's absolutely important that your beacon is a key layer of margin. Your beacon, shovel, and your probe. That's your get out of jail card. And we posted a bunch of stuff about that. And hands up, we're sponsored by Mammoth, and so clearly we're biased. I mean, I used to like, I used to like that beacon, but that switch, I feel is absolutely problematic. And I've seen some fixes out there. There's some guy doing 3D printing of a clamp that stops the switch running, but yeah, for me, ultimately, the margin's not. None of that. You've got to have confidence in that. Confidence is everything in your beacon, and if you can reinstate that margin by going and buying a different margin, personally, that would be my choice.
Right, and it layers in that whole idea of the mindset, and if you've got that nagging in the back of your head, that's just adding uncertainty and a little bit more monkey crawling into the front seat.
Yeah, it's it falls within that margin of that addresses culture, right? It's a margin that the monkey can't mess with. It's a margin that our poor human behaviors of like, nah, be all right, man, and like that Ulysses contract goes out the door. It's like margins that address that culture are great because they can't be messed with. And the margin of always doing a beacon check at the trailhead, the margin of having a modern 3-antenna beacon for clean batteries, fresh batteries in it, they can't be taken away. And it's an easy cheap. The beauty of them is a lot of those margins packing they're cheap. They cost you nothing. You get out of bed an hour earlier. It's cost you nothing. And having that right equipment costs you a few dollars, but ultimately it costs you, very little.
It looks like Frank's got a question too. Frank, are you unmuted and fire
I'm
away?
unmuted, but you're not letting me start my video, but that's okay.
Oh, well, hang on.
First of all, thanks a lot, Mike. This is great. You did a bunch of good reading, and you suggested a bunch of good reading, I think, for everyone. I did just want to ask you, as you were doing your research, and I forget the author who came up with the concept of educating your intuition. Do you kind of equate that the gentleman or gentlewoman in your analogy is basically that part of us that can train our chimpanzee, which is our intuition to some degree?
Yeah, well, and that's I think that's actually a really good point. It's like that inner chimp, that fight and flight character that's in there. He is your intuition. He is your he is your backup guy. So to say that you need to not have him with you isn't correct. It was that intuition, in our case study there, that kind of picked up that anomaly and made our decision. It was the monkey that got us off the slope, right? In many ways. When it comes to intuition, I don't know who said it. I think, but I love the phrase of using intuition is use it to say no, but never to say go. I really like that phrase there, right? Don't use, don't let the monkey make the decision to do something you want to do, but use him to say no, don't do that. Right?
Yeah, listen to the monkey to head back and get a banana shake.
But he's tricky. He always, generally when he crops up, it's because he wants to have a good time, right? He wants to ski pow. It's like be all right, it'll be good. Oh, it's just a hanging glide crack. Those things never go. Come on, let's go. Right? He's generally a monkey for a reason, because he's a monkey.
That's awesome, Mike. Thanks. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
No, there's just one quick question. The laminated cards in the early slide, are those available for purchase?
They are, and they're part of a pack. There's not just one. It's some cool stuff on there with rescue numbers and a decision matrix over terrain. And if you just jump on our Avalanche Geeks, any of our social media, and scroll through it, you'll see them at some point, like a post a few weeks ago, and then there'll be a link on there where you can buy them. We have the kind of cheap, I think they're like $10 or something for 5 of these ring binded plastic cards that you can take in the field. And they're priming tools, but they're kind of
we'll dig that up and then repost that through our social media so everyone can find those.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
They're probably free though if they take an Avalanche course. So maybe that's an option for somebody.
Yeah, it might be
Come
cheaper.
to Chamonix and give a course.
Flying into Europe and booking a hotel for a week and doing a course with us might,
Yeah, better do. Okay, good. Hey, I just wanted to, Joe, you can wrap up if you want. I did want to point out to everyone that there is a free talk that the American Avalanche Association is putting on right now, basically starting at 8:30. I posted the Zoom link in our social media, on our events calendar. So if you go navigate to mountwashingtonavalanchecenter.org, go to our calendar, and you'll click on that and open it up, and there's a Zoom link to that talk. There will be some Pascal Hageli will talk about avalanche airbag packs and present some interesting research on that topic. Someone else is going to talk about the RECO device, and then New England's own Jonathan Sheffitz will be presenting on avalanche beacons. So that's their Mountain Time, 6:30, or here 8:30. Zoom links in our calendar. Thanks everybody for joining us, and thanks for your questions and engagement. And most of all, thanks Mike for staying up to 2:30 a.m. there outside of Chamonix.
Yeah, thank you very much,
Good
Mike.
night,
I
everybody.
really appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers, Frank. Cheers, Joe. Appreciate it. It's great talking to you.
All right, everyone have a good night and jump over to the AAA thing.
Thanks, Mike. That was awesome.
Yeah, no,